Let's dive in to the bossy choleric.
The bossy choleric.
As he looks at me. So I started with this one because I think it's easy for me to pick on myself before people think that I'm picking on them. So I want you to know that as we tackle each of these, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so I think that it is important to know that it's okay if you are the temperament you didn't want to be. And I think that, I don't know, I think I usually will meet a lot of people, they're like, I don't want to be that temperament. I'm like, well, sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
Like,
it's just how you incarnate it.
They'll say, I think I'm this, and you'll say, no, you're not.
You're not. And it's okay. It's totally okay. Often I can peg somebody from one conversation. And often if you're somebody that I work with and you message me, sorry, I got allergies like crazy. And you message me and you say, this is what I think I am, I might steer you somewhere else. And it's all out of love. And the reason why I think temperament is so, so important is once we understand ourselves and we understand like why we do what we do, it's easy to understand other people. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to have compassion for other people.
And to navigate the best way things can happen. And
especially in a family.
That doesn't hurt people's feelings or...
Well, and I think as we balance and we are conscious about it, because balancing is so, so important, and being conscious of all of that is so important, then we, like for me, being a choleric, I could be a bull in a china shop if I'm not careful. Like, and be really mean.
Yeah.
I know it about myself. I know that if I let verbal diarrhea take over, it's not going to be pretty, and there's going to be lots of hurt feelings and people might cry.
Yeah.
So I have to really temper myself and think about my audience and who I'm talking to and how to get that across. And you know, once I really started doing that more, and that was probably, I would say I have been much more aware in probably the last 13, 14 years. Definitely more so in the last 10 that I have been actively, okay, I can't say that. Oh, if I say that, she's going to cry. Oh, if I, like that kind of situation. Because it isn't about censoring myself as much as it is about having compassion and love for the people that I'm around. And I think I struggle, as a choleric, I struggle with people that are like, if you don't like what I have to say, you can just go home. Because I hear other cholerics that say that. And I think I hear that the most from other cholerics and really angry melancholies that are like, in your face, angry. I think that when we are conscious about sort of who we are and how we're showing up, we have to make a commitment to ourselves, like, how we want that to be. And it's not about outward appearances. It's about what happens in here. Because when I'm low up and I'm angry at somebody, it doesn't help me in here.
No. I mean, when that happens, it's like a snowball effect because...
It's never about one thing.
No. Because, say, chores didn't get done and this other thing didn't get done and something else didn't get done. But what will happen is, okay, this didn't get cleaned up. And then this thing, and that thing, and that thing, and that thing, and then it goes like...
Then I go, all right.
It's like, oh no, we just did it. We pushed the wrong button.
You pushed the wrong button. We said the wrong thing. We asked her about TV one too many times. Usually, Sam and Soraya are really good at... Well, Sam is really good at that. Soraya is still a little clueless. But, I think that... but I think that, I guess, for myself, as a choleric, I grew up an only child, so I didn't have anybody to boss around for a long time. Certainly did not boss my parents around. I will say that. I am a child of the 70s. I had plenty of spankings. I'm still normal, but I'm not promoting spanking at all. Just saying I'm still normal, and that I did not have anybody to boss around as a child. But I definitely can think of times in my life, in my younger childhood years, where I wanted to lead and I wanted to be in charge, and I wanted to. So I can think of those times, but because even though I don't have contact with my birth father, he was the choleric. He was the drill sergeant for his job, like for reals, and excuse me. And so a choleric will always yield to another choleric that they respect. I yielded to him because he was my dad. I loved him as a child. Now that story is kind of out to lunch, but I yielded to him until my intellect was strong enough to go, oh, wait a minute. He's a jerk. He's not just my dad. He's a jerk. And then after that, and I was a teenager probably when that happened. I was probably when I first started seeing that. And of course my parents were already divorced by then, but I remember like wondering, okay, who is this dude? Like why? Because you go through this period, I think, when you're about 15 or so years old, where you go from feeling like you knew everything within you, that everything was right with the world, to then this transition of, oh, wait a minute, it's not at all like I thought it was, or it's changing. And that can be a very traumatic time, I think, for other temperaments. I think for me, it was like this eye-opening. I think that cholerics, we're very like, okay, well, that's wrong, and I can just pick up my ladder and move to a different wall sort of situation. And so I feel like for me, it was very much a, okay, well, this is how he's going to show up. And he's always shown up this way. And now as an adult looking back, I can see all of the ways he always showed up that way, even though I loved him and respected him as a child. So choleric will always yield to another choleric that they trust. They will also yield to another temperament if they trust them. But if they don't trust them, they will not yield. And they will be, Marie, this answers your question, they will be more of a bull in a china shop if they do not respect you.
More to see right there.
So she says, I don't see that child is angry necessarily, but he is just full go. Yeah. I don't think it has anything to do with anger. And that can be scary to so many non-choleric kids. So you are saying I need to teach him compassion towards everyone else. Give me some words to give my child, please, like I feel. Okay, so definitely the choleric child needs empathy lessons. I don't think we show up with a great deal of empathy. I think that I had good friendships growing up, but it was like, if I look back on them, most of them I was always like, and if you ask my mom, Mom, if you're here, I think I was always the dominant one. I always had to dominate. And it wasn't until, again, well, for instance, in high school, not only was I in a space where I felt like I had to be top dog as the girlfriend, most of my friends were guys. Because in my head, in my choleric head, I was like, so much easier to not deal with all of that emotion that girls come with sometimes. And learning how to deal with my own emotion at the same time. So I think it's very multi-layered. And so it was just easier for me to be friends with guys, because I knew that, especially ones that I wasn't romantically wanting to have anything to do with, because it was easy for me to just show up as I was, and it wasn't a big deal. And they could take me for that and not think I was some girl that was pining over them. So I did have that, that going on in high school. But I also think that really what happened was, once I started to develop my empathy, and we come with some of it, but I think that so much is nurture. So much is like how my mother showed up, and how she, for all of the things that she quote unquote didn't do right, there were 1,000 things that she did do right, as far as like helping me to see, to have more feelings about things, helping me to foster a relationship with God and Source, and to keep that as that, because that became a lifeline for me, I think, towards empathy. and understanding that. And so I think that even though I walked away from a lot of that from my childhood, it definitely helped me to very much be grounded in the space of understanding empathy. And then as I got older, I think that a choleric boy has a different set than a choleric girl. A choleric girl that grows up to have a family, like the moment you start carrying a child, you should have some empathy things that just start clicking into place, because you're automatically, you have to nurture your body so that you can nurture somebody else. And if you are emotionally healthy, those are the things that click into place. So for a choleric boy, I would definitely make sure that you are saying things like, hey, let's think about how this person feels. Like, how would you feel if? And put them in, because I think that from a choleric perspective, when I stop to think about how somebody else would feel when I act a certain way, it doesn't matter what temperament they are, I start to go, okay, I can see that. I may not like it. I often do not like it. I go, are you kidding me? Why does she have to think that way? But it definitely gives me more perspective. And so some things that you can do now, Marie, are just, I would just teach him, let's talk about that. And I would do it proactively. So I would proactively discuss, let's talk about these friends that you have, or let's talk about, this other adult that you're struggling with. Because if you don't, like, I can remember one of the things that and like I said, my dad was a drill sergeant, so it was always like, you better behave, because if you don't, so there was that fear attached to it, and I don't want to parent that way. But that definitely for me was a place for me to go, I better keep my mouth shut. Mm-hmm. Like with teachers, with no matter what situation I was in, unless I knew better or unless I could go toe to toe with somebody, I was just quiet, and I'm not a quiet person.
And one thing that's tricky is when you have a choleric child and you are not choleric.
Right, because Soraya is very much a mold of her mother. And you are not.
And she puts a tremendous amount of will and energy towards everything she does. And so I find I have to think like 3 steps ahead of her to direct things. Because if I don't, she'll all of a sudden take charge of things.
But 3 steps ahead, it's really funny that you say that, because 3 steps ahead, when Eric and I were dating, he would say things like, you're always 3 steps ahead of me. Mostly sanguine, but I have to be choleric with him. And I don't look like I am overly empathetic myself. Yeah, that can be a struggle with sanguine sometimes. I care about people, but to a girl phlegmatic, I look mean. Yes. And so, definitely what I would say is, so for you being sanguine, and we'll slow down. Often what looks like mean is just you're in a hurry. You're like, okay, I'm done with that. I gotta go to this place. And that's sanguine is my secondary. So it's very easy for me to be like, okay, get to the point. And I'm already thinking about something else. But as an adult, as a grown-up that really seeks to be balanced, I have to slow down. And so that's what I'm saying to you, Marie. You have to slow down. Knowing yourself and knowing sort of how you are showing up, you have to stop and ask yourself, how do I look to these other people? Because I think that as a grown-up that wants to show up in an empathetic way, you have to decide that it's not their job. It's not the other person's job to go, well, she's just choleric and she's mean, or she's just sanguine and she doesn't care, or it's your job to connect. And the people that you choose to connect with, and when you connect first, then you will build a bridge. And so, it's really easy for me to just answer the question. But when somebody takes the time to email me or message me or even call me on the phone, and they take the time to ask me about me, it's my job to also say, talk to me about you. How are you doing today? and actively listen. The best thing you could do as a choleric or any temperament, but ones that tend to have a lot of will and when you tend to be like really fast, is to learn to actively listen and to slow down. I'm going to get some comments over here. This person says, we also praise my child's efforts when we see it. Something like, I saw you helped your friend when I'm proud of you. I think that's great. I think that's great for all temperaments, but I think the choleric needs to see that you are seeing them. I think that when they don't think you're seeing them, then they get louder. Mm-hmm. Then they get more boisterous. Then they get more frustrated, angry, aggressive. Especially from a child's perspective. Actually, I can think of some adults that, not to myself, but some adults that I go, you don't have to be like that, right? Like in my head. And so you can definitely tell an unbalanced choleric adult when they won't yield to anyone, even another choleric that they trust, because they don't trust anybody. She also says it also helps to learn words to attach to their feelings. I agree. I think that I would be very careful with some forms of communication because I think they can be manipulating.
Manipulative.
Yeah, there we go. That was the word I was looking for. But I think that when you can say things like, I feel, instead of you made me feel. Mm-hmm. When you can say things like, I feel this way. Or like as a mom that's choleric and trying to build that in Soraya, I will say things like, let's talk about how you feel, and then let's talk about how that other person feels. Doing that over and over and over again. Then when you are in the thick of it with them and another child, you can stop them and say, hey, remember we had this talk the other day about how other people might feel? And they go, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Because the trick for the choleric is to have somebody say when they apologize that they mean it, and not just that it's like, oh, fine, I have to say this so I can get over it. The trick is to have that empathy piece kick in, and I think that for Soraya, I'm definitely seeing it in her. She's almost 8 years old, and we've worked with her a lot. She often a choleric child that gets, I think, more boisterous. It's because they're confused as to why the rest of the world is showing up this way. And so when you can help them not be confused, it's super helpful. Amberly says, oh, that makes sense. As a sanguine, when I get angry, I try to do all the things, and my poor 7-year-old is just not moving fast enough. Yep. Yes.
One thing I guess I've learned about cholerics is when a cleric's unbalanced, they might come up with a to-do list for the day that's not realistic. Never. And then, but the thing is like on my end, I go,
well, he's a time cop.
Well, I'm like, that can't happen because it takes
watch me.
this much time.
I'll make it happen.
To get over here, and you have to factor in that it's rush hour or it's spring break, and it's going to take 20 minutes just to get out of where we live. Right. And then, but then on the flip side of that, you might say, well, you're underestimating how much we get done. And somehow, if you take what I'm saying, what you're saying, and
you marry the two, yeah.
We in the middle, it's accurate.
Absolutely. And I think that it's totally, I completely agree. But I have to say that, so Eric is my second husband. My other one was the practice. We have been married for almost 14 years. It'll be 14 years this year. Like, that is so amazing. Mm-hmm. I can count. Now, listen, choleric ladies and gentlemen. I can count all of our fights on one hand and have fingers left over. And a lot of that is because I have to decide what I want to fight about. What is it that I'm going, nope, that's my line in the sand. Yeah. And a lot of it is him going, she's just being loud right now, and she will stop. If I say the sexiest words, which are, what can I do to help? So then I'm like, thank you, you could do this right here. And then my job is to soften and to breathe and to get like through that emotion. I think that, I think that having that space to really understand myself allows me then to go, walk forward. Let's see. Another one over here, I statements. Yeah, this is the other mom said I statements. I statements are super important. I feel instead of you do this to me. Cholerics, we're really good at hiding crap. We're really good at like, nope, nobody has to see what's bad in my life. And that's a good thing, I think. I think that for every choleric that hides stuff, there's a melancholy that lets it all hang out. So I think that we have, probably too much. We hold on to too much. Definitely, I think that when I think of stressful times in our life, if I didn't have him to help balance me with that, I think that I would have had another stroke by now. I definitely think one of the things that I was thinking about the other day is I would love to see a study done on illness and temperament. Because I think that all of the heart stuff, blood pressure stuff, those are all cholerics. It's just like, we have had it and y'all need to flippin' listen to me. And if you don't, I'm going to die. That kind of thing. Where I think that other temperaments tend to be more like letting it eat them inside. And so that shows up in other ways, for sure.
One thing with us that we've both learned is that, and as a phlegmatic, it's easy for me to go, well, she has an exact way she likes things done, and she really wants these things done. So I'm just going to go hang out over here.
Oh, right.
And then you get exhausted and worn out because I just go, well, I don't think I can do it as good as she can do it. So I'm just going to let her do all the things.
Right. No, I think that's a really good point.
And then you're like, hey, I'm like exhausted because I'm doing all the things. So
because the cleric will not ask for help. We have a really hard time asking for help. And so
then I'm like, okay, well, what is it that I can do? And there's a process where you've had to let go that these things might not get done exactly how I want, but if I do everything, then I can't do the 2 or 3 things that are super important the way I want because I'm spread thin, and then I start resenting people that are off, like goofing off because they're not doing any of the thing, and I'm doing all the things.
Absolutely, I think that goes for every level of my life. So we got a great business coach last year, and he was like, "You need to start handing things off." I was like, "What? No, I can't do that." Just ask Kelly. She's like, "Please put more things on my plate." And so it has definitely been a process of me being able to go, okay, well, you can have that, and you can have that, and I don't need to do this, and but it's definitely a process. It's a process, and what the other thing that we have trouble with is we often don't have a good relationship with time. Time does not always work for me, and it's because I try to do too much. So some of that could definitely be like, because my secondary is definitely sanguine. Pushing more things into that space, but then there's the choleric in me that's like, no, I want to do it all.
Because like I get uncomfortable about being late to things.
I know, and I'm like,
and you're like, I got to get this done and this done and this done before we go. It's like we don't have time to do that.
No, and I'm like, yes, we do. Could you just make time stop?
So
need that like Harry Potter time bending thing.
So I mean, we balance ourselves out because there's certain things that would never get done.
Right.
If it was all up to me, but then there's things that
we'd look
would
like
also
crazy
not happen.
Overachievers if it was me.
There's things that also wouldn't happen if I wasn't like, we gotta be done with that. It's time
absolutely. He's a very good balance, but I will say too that he is a very good balance because he is a balanced phlegmatic. If he were an unbalanced phlegmatic, he'd be like, I don't care. Go ahead. I'm just to sit here and play this video game. We would not be married if that were the case.
Well, we've talked to families where one of them is like, you know what, I am just going to sit here and play this video game.
Well, I would say that I think when, it's a traditional situation, and I say traditional doesn't mean it's right or wrong. Traditional situation where mom is staying home and dad's going off to work. So if that dad is phlegmatic, when he comes home, he is probably also introverted. I don't think all phlegmatics are introverted, but I definitely think that a lot are. And so he's like, I have dealt with people all day. I just need to be in my bubble. and I know you've dealt with these people all day, but I need to be in my bubble. And dad has to be like, oh, wait a minute, it's my turn to be on. And I think that that is something that is really hard for a lot of dads that have that temperament. And so I would say to those dads that are listening, take your introspective time on your way home. Park a block away, take 10 minutes, spend 10 minutes not listening to the news, not on your phone, just taking in the silence so that you can walk in the door and help mom. We've got some over here too. Tally says, can you be forced to be a temperament and then reach a breaking point and switch because your body and mental state won't allow it anymore? I know what you are talking about, and the answer is no. But I will say this.
Your secondary could
start to kick in. But I'm thinking about, and we'll talk about this a lot more when we get to the melancholy. A lot of moms think that they are choleric, and they're not. So here's how you know that you're not. I think that, and I know people will argue with me, this choleric secondary is almost always sanguine, because for a couple of reasons. So, excuse me. A choleric, either they have a secondary of sanguine, or they're just pure, full-on, unbalanced choleric. And I know this is like the gospel according to Melisa, but I've done a lot of study on this, and this is why I think this. A choleric's need to dominate does not come from emotion. It does not come from situation. It comes from in here. If you are, if you think you are choleric, but you can't get through a commercial without crying, you're not choleric. Because I'm like, screw that commercial, I'm done. You're a melancholy that's really pissed off. And that can show up as being a choleric. Cholerics generally are not passive aggressive. They're not underhanded thinking about what they can do to hurt somebody else. They're not in that place. A melancholy that is really angry and unbalanced and has had too much on his or her plate for too long without any help can absolutely show up and look choleric in their anger, in their yelling, and their screaming. But the way you know you're not is that you are hooked on your emotions, and those are always going to pull you back. It is really easy for me to walk away from an emotional situation and be like, I'm done. So when I was going through my divorce, a dear friend of mine that I had helped go through her divorce, and I was like, great, she's going to be on my side. She's going to help me out through my divorce. No, she was not, because it was too painful for her. She was definitely melancholy. And even though she was pretty balanced, she was like, I don't know how you can be ready to end your marriage and have it not tear you up. And I was like, because I was done 5 years ago. Yeah. So like for me, I was like, I'm already finished. I just need to sign the paper. Could you just watch my kid while I go sign the paper? And so it's from a very different place. We can get over things like that. So that's how you know. If you think that you are choleric and you are hanging on to things, you're not choleric, because we don't hang on to things. I cannot remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. So that's part of my sanguine in there, but really and truly it's because I go, well, that chapter's done. I'm moving on.
And I'll be like, do you remember that time 5 years ago?
I know,
like,
he'll say things, I go, what are you
still
talking about?
What? Yeah.
What are you talking about? So, okay, so Lennon says, first Stacy says, I'm laughing out loud. This is me. I am just starting to realize. And then Lennon says, I'm pretty sure that my 9-year-old is melancholic, but he has moments of pure choleric and just not when angry. But he doesn't appear as choleric all the time. I know you said the mix doesn't really happen. I read between Form and Freedom that many melancholic children grow up to be choleric. What do you think? Okay, so this was the other thing that I was going to say, so I'm glad you brought that up. Often, a phlegmatic will confuse themselves as a melancholy, because even though the student is usually really placid and calm, if you piss him off, that is not the case. He can get more angry than I could ever dream to get. Why? Because you're attached to the emotion of it. I'm not usually attached to the emotion of it. So I think that, but that doesn't just go for anger. That goes for any project. Like you get a phlegmatic going on a project that they are dialed into, and there is no stopping them. So Steiner called the phlegmatic the sleeping choleric. So if you can think of an ocean wave and it crests, it's just kind of, and then it comes down.
Mm-hmm.
That's the phlegmatic. So what you may be seeing is a child that is melancholy with a secondary phlegmatic. I see that one a lot. That's Super Sam. Super Sam is phlegmatic with the side of melancholy. Becca says, how do you sort out PTSD? Okay, yes, we're going to talk about that. Because it can change you as a child. Does it make a tri-temperament? Do you still have a primary and a secondary plus an other, or does it replace it? So there are times in our lives when we can have something traumatic happen, and I do think it changes how you show up. I don't know that I believe, because I really believe, because people have asked me this question, how is it different than the temperament type or the personality types? I believe that temperament is attached to your soul. So this meat suit's gone, we're still who we are. Where I believe that the personality types that we have sort of are attached to this human existence, this space. And so that really takes you like understanding and believing that we have a soul, we have a spirit, we are not just who we are showing up as. And so when you can see that, then you can really sort of dial into, how did I show up? And I think that when we have things that happen in our lives that change us at our core, whether it be abuse as a child or abuse as an adult, those things really change us. And I remember when we had this talk, it was years ago, about like trying to figure out what temperament my mom was. And if you're still listening, Mom, you might enjoy this conversation. Because while she had this great, amazing childhood, she was abused. And so that changed sort of how she showed up. And it's amazing to watch her now, because she's definitely been in recovery of that for a lot of years. And her, what I believe she was as a child, is finally coming back out in a, not finally, I think it's been coming back out in the last 10 years or so, 10 to 20 years, in a very beautiful way. And she's very balanced. And so I think that we have to look at those abuse markers or those life-changing event markers and try to go back before that. But if you were abused as a child and you can't remember before that, then you really have to take where you are now, and you have to separate when things come up. You have to ask yourself, is this coming from me, or is it coming from that voice in my head that I can't ever shut off? Because if it's that voice in your head that's, overly critical, if it is a voice in your head that does not come from you, and you have to stop and sit with it and say, where does this come from? Does this come from me? Or is this coming from all the minutia of stuff that I have let people give to me over the years? So I think that that's a really important thing. I will also say, I think that my stroke, because I had a stroke, it's been 5 years. It's been 5 years, because Soray's about to be, right? Or has it been 6 years? Anyway, it's been a lot of years.
Yeah.
I think that what my stroke did was because it completely changed my way of thinking. As a choleric, I was like, I don't want to die. That's not okay with me. I have stuff that I still need to do. It's like the choleric in me that's like, not having that conversation. Then I had to have another conversation, which was, you got to chill out then. And so I would say I have picked up a lot more phlegmatic traits since then, and that I am able to relax more than I was. So traumatic events definitely change our lives. But it doesn't change who we are at our core, I don't believe. Cholerics and sanguines tend to be in the space of not being able to handle emotion. And it's not because we're unkind. It's just because we can be like that and be done. And so I think that in order to balance, in order to have others see our empathy, we have to stand in their sad for a little bit. And that can sometimes, yes, it's draining, but it also builds these bridges. And so we have to sort of take those bridges and cultivate them, build them brick by brick. And that doesn't happen by us just turning it off. We have to be able to stand in their sad with them, carry tissues in your purse, and just like be able to breathe with them, because I think that shows them, the other temperaments, how much you love and care for them. It's not enough. And you know, as a choleric, I'm like, can't you, I said I love you. Like what else do you need from me? But we have to show it. And that is definitely this further place in balancing. It's this further place in like, what do we want next? Where do we want, what do we want people to, do we want to be approachable? Do we want to be loved? Do we want to be seen as loving? And I think especially if we're in any kind of leadership position or where you're working with other people regularly, you have to be willing to stand in that place of sad with them. So, okay, and then to see, she does say all temperaments are amazing. They are. And Becca Barrett says, does that replace the primary or secondary?
Or maybe a third.
I don't think it replaces it. I think that it's just a longer journey. I think that when you have been abused as a child, I think it might be a longer journey to sorting things out. But I think that because I think it will take you longer, but I do think that it does not necessarily replace, but it might sort of sit on top of that other one. I've got some comments over here I was going to grab. I find that when my child is misunderstood or struggles to verbalize her feelings, that's when the meltdowns happen. Yes, yes, yes. When I take the time to slow down, listen, and repeat what they say so they know I hear. Yes, I think that that's super, super important. I think that when it comes to children that are choleric, we have to be able to, that's when Soraya gets her most, when she's frustrated at something, whether it's not being heard, thinking she heard something that she didn't, or upset that she can't make something happen in her little body that's 7 and wishes that, you know, she can make everything that's happening inside her head, like, come to fruition. Yeah. I think that that's when we see those tantrums the most with them. And so I think that the best thing that we can do is recognize, because they're going to get over it lickety split. They will. You know, a melancholy child is going to want to cry about it all afternoon and then keep coming back to it. But a choleric child will generally, while they will remember the other things that happened, they will generally be like done. And so it's a matter of helping them get to that done space while still saying that you hear them. And so while they might just seem like really defiant or really angry, and really I think it's a lot of just about extra emotion. And so one thing that helps Soraya a ton, don't think it would have helped Sam in this situation, but Sam's had like one tantrum his entire life. He was 2. He's so chill. One thing that really helps her is when she's in that place, I make her run. I make her run. When she is in a tantrum, she cannot get and usually it's because I've not caught it. I haven't caught it, and so like before it starts, so your job as mom is to be like, you've got to hold the space and be aware and be listening and feeling, because you're connected. So feeling for your child. If I have not caught her before she spirals out of control, or if somebody else is in charge with her and she spirals out of control, then we remove her from the situation and we go, I go, you got to run until you can stop like doing the anger. You got to get it out, because action, like movement, moves the brain. It creates clarity. Action breeds clarity. So action breeds clarity in the brain. That's for all temperaments. But when it comes to especially the choleric child that is so angry and so in that moment, because we do live in the moment, you've got to get them out of that space. And so making her run, Somebody says, how do you make her run? I just go, run. And she listens to me. But again, she respects me because of how I show up. And I show up consistently. So she knows, oh, she said run, so I'm going to have to run. and she doesn't run because she's afraid she's going to get a beating. She doesn't run because she's afraid she's going to get me screaming at her. She runs because I said run. And she respects me because of our temperaments. And so I think that when you can be in that space of really showing up for your children the way they need you to. Now, that also means that if you are not a choleric parent and you have a choleric child, you have to know how to show up for them. And that means you cannot be wishy-washy. If you are parenting a choleric child, especially when they're out of early childhood and they're moving into this beautiful space that's going to eventually be adulthood, you need to have their flipping lessons ready for them. You need to be ready for them. If you are not ready for them and on it, you're going to struggle. You have to be on point for them. That is just how it is. A phlegmatic or a melancholy child might be like, oh, it's all right, Mom. Don't stress. Samuel will be like, I'm just going to sit here and read this book. Sorry, it's like, where's my lesson? What are we doing today? I need to know. And that's how she shows up now. I know when she's 12, 14, 16, that she will always keep us on our toes. So when you're doing your school planning, I would plan for your choleric child first so that you know the planning is all done. You don't have to stress about it again. I think that it's definitely about sort of how you can show up for them. And then if you're a choleric mom, how you show up for them, for those that are not in that temperament. If you're a choleric mom and you have a child that is melancholy, please, please, please do not show up guns blazing. You have to really think about them. You know, our oldest daughter is melancholy. And whew, that was the training. That was the training in learning how to deal with melancholies. There are things that you can say that will be taken differently by every temperament. So you want to be careful how you say them. You want to make sure that you are appealing to their space of how they are showing up. And so, you know, often what we got from Eleanor was, you're yelling at me. And I was like, I'm not yelling, but I did tell you what you needed to get done. So you want to like see how you want to, you know, be careful with that.
In her mind, the more it was something she didn't want to hear, in her mind, the louder it was.
Right. Exactly. That was exactly it. And I do think that, so if you're melancholy and you're like, people are yelling at me all the time, I think it's a good thing to think about. Like, is it just because I don't want to hear this? The phlegmatic, like to parent Sam, I just have to look at him sideways and I can make him cry. So I'm really careful about like, hey, this needs to be done. Okay. He'll go and do it.
I'm sorry,
yes.
sorry.
And so, and I don't do that. I'm sorry. So I'm like, okay, you don't say you're sorry unless you actually hurt somebody. So if you're doing that, I'm sorry. It's because you're trying to cover your butt. So stop it. Because that just doesn't, like as a choleric, I'm like, it's unnecessary words. So I am very careful about how I approach Sam. Now, as a choleric mom, he can take forever to eat. Eric loves that. They go on Wednesdays and y'all take an hour to eat your lunch after you've been to the library. I can't do that. When they go with me, they're like, wait, aren't we going in? I'm like, nope, going through the drive-thru. Like, what is going on? When we go with dad, I go, I know, but you're not with dad today. Phlegmatic dad parenting a choleric daughter, specifically to the idea of cultivating respect.
Well, with Soraya, I know that I have to be mentally prepared for what I think she's going to do, and I have to set firm boundaries that she understands so that I go, these are the lines that if you cross, we're having a problem. Right,
because I think that any other temperament, so the choleric will go, okay, well, there's the line, and they'll just go right up to it, usually. Mm-hmm. Most days, they won't try to step over it, they'll just go right up to it because they know that it's firm and it's there. But if it's not firm, they'll be like, I'm just going to climb all over it.
Well, because Soraya can be very persistent, and if there's something she wants to do, but it doesn't really fit, or it isn't something that she should even be doing anyway, then it's like, I go, okay, this isn't happening today. I got a great idea. Maybe if we do this, we can do that. I'm like, no, because it's not anything that should or would or could happen, and it's either like not something I had planned on for budgetary reasons or time reasons, or it just isn't like, or she wants to make an artificial heart that works out of her cardboard and scissors. And so
that totally sounds like a
so
project she would do.
I have, so there has to be, I have to plan ahead for it, and there has to be some firm boundaries that she
Right.
understands. It's like I took her to Costco, and I usually have her sit in the cart because she's contained.
Right.
And she begged to not go in the cart, and I said, if there is a problem, then you're going in the cart. And then she took off in the store and came back with like some different brand of like these Hostess type cupcake things. And I was like, you disobeyed. You ran off and you came back with something you knew I wouldn't put in the cart. You're getting in the cart. No, I want another chance. Nope.
Yeah, because
You
I think
did
the
this.
phlegmatic parents, your default might be, okay, you can have another chance.
Well, and as a phlegmatic, I think about it as like it's easy to like do the thing that's less work now and then have it be a bigger thing later. And so I have to train myself like, if I take care of this now, it won't be bad later.
Right.
And so
that's
I
a
just
challenge
said,
for a lot of phlegmatic parents.
you messed up. This was the deal.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting in the cart because you disobeyed, and this is what has to happen. But I knew like if I just gave her another chance, she'd go and do it again.
Of course she would. Duh.
She
would find the Nutella and bring it back to the cart. I think that when you are not a choleric and you are parenting a choleric child, the number one best thing you can do is work on follow through. You've got to get yourself to a place where what you say is what they believe, and that you actually follow through. If you consistently do not follow through, they will consistently not listen to you because they lose all respect for you. In my adult life, the people that I do not have respect for are people who don't do what they say they're going to do. And so, and I have to say, as like a sanguine who likes to put too many things on my plate, I can be that person sometimes, and I don't like that about myself. I get really frustrated at myself. So I think the best thing you can do is, one, remember that their temperament will likely change, but not always, as they live into it a little bit more. Children under 6 are in a very choleric time in their life. And so that's very much choleric, and then they're turn into the sanguine time in their life. So because they're needy, they have a lot of needs. And so, but what I would definitely do is make sure that what you say is actually what you're going to do. And if it's not, don't say it. Don't say it, because we have a family that we're working with, and the child has special needs, and the mom is very phlegmatic, and I'm like, don't say that if you're not actually going to do it, because he'll know. It's like training a puppy. If you tell the puppy that you're going to take them outside and you only do it like half the time, guess what? They're going to pee on your floor because they don't trust that you're going to take them outside. So you have to really be in that space of they have to trust you. If you want more conversation on temperament, join Thinking, Feeling, Willing. That is where we have a lot of conversation on temperament. A lot of the moms that showed up here today are Thinking, Feeling, Willing moms. You are always welcome to start these conversations over in that support group, because we are happy to tackle them. And you can always tag Eric in those conversations too, because he's a member of that group.